Hi, this is Tina Drago. You're listening to Healthy Las Vegas, KDWN 720. We're coming to you live from the Beasley Broadcast Studio A. Today I have in the studio with me Dr. Jeffrey Brown. He is a DO, that's Doctor of Osteopath, and I want him to talk to us and tell us more about integrated medicine, the myths and the facts. Dr. Brown, tell us about your background.
My background, well, as you said, I'm an osteopath. I studied at the New York College of Osteopathic Medicine, obviously out in New York, Long Island, New York. I did a family practice residency in Jamaica, Queens, New York. And then we moved out here to Vegas.
To get warm?
To get warm and to pay less taxes. We love this no state tax, and not to have all your payroll going to, city, state. I mean, it was ridiculous out in New York. Very high cost of living out there.
We try to be friendly to our medical providers out here in Las Vegas. Dr. Brown, integrated medicine. You hear on television the pros, the cons. I really want to get down to what integrated medicine is, the definition, so people truly understand when they hear integrated medicine or holistic medicine, what they're actually talking about. Yeah,
well, it's funny because there are a lot of different terms out there when you're looking at using alternative medicine.
That's another one, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I hate to use the word alternative medicine, but anything that goes outside of traditional medicine, we tend to call that alternative, as if that's, secondary, but it's just an alternative way of doing things that's different, I should say, different than the traditional model that we have here in the United States. So integrative medicine basically is someone who is open to using alternative, or we call complementary and alternative medicine. And that could be acupuncture, reflexology, using more nutrition. Chiropractic is even considered, you can say, alternative medicine, because outside of the traditional model. So, integrative medicine are basically people who are open to doing alternative things. So
you are an MD, though, also, correct?
No, I am a DO.
Okay, so what is the difference between a DO and an MD?
So an MD, they call that allopathic medicine, which is disease-orientated, and most people don't know that. So medical doctors, they go to school for 4 years, and they go to residency, and they specialize. As an osteopath, we also do the same thing. We go to school for 4 years, and we go to residency, and we specialize. The difference is DO stands for a doctor of osteopathy, meaning that kind of bone is the focus, but basically we believe the body can heal itself. We focus on the spine. We have to go through training, utilizing our hands to be able to diagnose and treat musculoskeletal disorders, and we believe a lot of things can stem from that. Similar to chiropractic. Now the difference is, of course, that we actually go to pharmacology and we can prescribe medications. We are in every field of medicine, from pediatrics to brain surgery. It doesn't really matter. It's just that our core fundamental belief in osteopathy is that the body has its own healing intrinsic mechanisms. It just needs some help.
So for a layman such as myself, being an MD means you're treating diseases.
Yes.
But being an osteopath means you're treating the whole body, even the mind, the soul, and you're not just treating the disease, but the entire person.
In theory, correct. But in reality, most DOs are basically MDs. You just said we just went to different schools. They just want to get into medical school, but they truly didn't embrace and enhance the osteopathic principles and training, because most DOs don't use their osteopathic manipulative skills.
So let's use something really simple. We live in Las Vegas. It is allergy season right now. Most MDs would prescribe Claritin, Zyrtec, or some other form of an allergen, right? Medicine. Mm-hmm. What would a DO do?
90% of them do the same thing. Yeah, there'd be no difference.
What would you do?
So the difference so for me, there are a couple of different ways we can do. So a lot of people who have really bad allergies, they also get sinus congestion, sinus headaches, just because the inflammation swells up. So, we're trained to also use our hands. So we can use our hands to manipulate the sinuses to try to free up and allow the fluid to flow using lymphatic drainage. In addition to that, I may also prescribe Zyrtec, Claritin, etc. But I'm also more inclined to use more natural remedies, more homeopathic remedies. So we'll use more nutritional supplements to try to help with, the allergies, in conjunction with or instead of, Claritin.
I watched you massage a patient's forehead. I wanted to have a headache just to get a massage. So,
Yeah.
And you did that for allergies, right? It was congestion.
Allergy, sinus congestion, gets clogged up. Yes, you try to free up those sinuses and help the fluid to move so you can get rid of the headaches.
Now, I've also witnessed you manipulating a patient's back, a spine, for when they throw out their back or they get sciatica or something along those lines, similar to a chiropractor, but it didn't appear as painful. I heard no crunching.
Yeah, no, we are trained to do that technique we call high velocity. So you'll hear the thrusting, the cracking, of the neck or the spine. But we also use a lot more soft tissue techniques. It's a lot of times when the patient's laying there, they don't even know we're doing anything. They say, okay, are you touching me? Are you doing anything? They see that my hands are steady. But we're working with the body. And we're allowing the body to do the work. We're allowing gravity to do the work. We kind of assist the body in improving movement, relaxing the tissue, helping things to move better. So it doesn't have to be, aggressive all the time.
Aggressive is not always fun.
Yeah. And so sometimes we know people get scared of the cracking. And so there's other ways to manipulate the body without cracking.
Excellent, because I'm a scaredy cat for the cracking. I don't like that. I do like the soft tissue massage every so often.
Less threatening.
Yes, it is less threatening. So I'm sitting here and I'm doing research on this, and there's a lot of integrative medical schools around the country that I don't think people understand or realize are integrative medical schools. As far as like Duke, and then there's also the American Hospital Association that's looking to bring in more DOs and more integrative medicine into the conventional medical world, primarily because of patient demand. Patients are looking outside. They did a study and they said something like 48% of people have used alternative methods to curing whatever ails them. And it could be grandma's secret recipe, or it could be going to an acupuncturist, or it could be going to a DO, but they're open-minded to using alternatives. And do you find that in your practice?
Yes. I think most people come to see me are looking for, a different approach.
They've sought you out specifically for that.
For something different. And those percentages sound right, because I think I researched that last year and I said, wow, and there's a lot of people who have tried other means to improve their condition. And I think mostly related to pain-related disorders is the biggest one. But yes, a lot of people have tried, different treatments.
So the American Hospital Association is saying that hospitals are even growing in offering complementary integrative medicine into their hospitals. From 1998, where only 8.6 of the hospitals offered it, in 2004, 20% offered it, and it's grown to 24% since 2009. So 1/4 of the hospitals in America are offering some form of integrated medicine within their hospitals at the patient's request. The big thing that I see when witnessing you with patients is that it's an entire whole body experience. It's not open, say, for a sore throat, but you talk to them about their lifestyle, you listen to them, you do VIP consultations. Is that so that you actually sit down with them and find out who the person that you're dealing with, so maybe there's outside activities that are affecting their health other than just maybe the normal run-of-the-mill reasons. Is that true?
Yeah. No, it's funny because when we were in medical school, that's what we were taught to do, is to do a history, in the physical. But medicine has changed, and a lot of that, I think, is basically the insurance that has influenced us due to lack of reimbursement. So you have to spend less time with patients. And so because of that, you have to figure out ways to get to the answer very quickly and then, move on. So depending on what kind of model you have can dictate, how much time you can spend with the patients. But that's what we were taught. The history and physical can give you 70% of the answers right there.
And it's just a matter of listening. I know most of the time doctors use their support staff, their medical assistants, their nurses in the office, or administrative people, to actually build the history of the patient, and then they read that history and then ask a few key questions.
Yep. I mean, that's unfortunately, that's the way you have to go. I mean, as long as they're doing it the right way, they're getting good questions and they know what to ask. And sometimes physicians have to ask a few more other questions on top of it. But yeah, you can get most of what you need right there.
Now, there's this researcher, Steinberg, and she's saying that there's a real connection between physicians and academic research, and they finally have a scientific understanding of the connection between the brain and the immune system, emotions, and diseases. That's bringing a lot of information together under one roof. Do you see that part of pain could be stemming from depression? Oh,
most definitely. Well, most chronic diseases we know is related to stress, cortisol. All the major disease, whether cancer, heart disease, diabetes, some of the major killers in America are linked to stress. And so we know that stress basically is an emotional thing, and it can be physical as well. But because of what that does to your immune system, what it does to your hormones, what it does to the blood sugar, what it does to all these things, it leads to disease. And unfortunately, here in the United States, we're all stressed. We're all running, trying to earn a living, trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to have more things. And it's just, your relationships, your marriages, your kids, paying for school. I mean, it goes on and on and on. We're all dealing with a lot of stress. And that in turn will lead to, health problems. It just does. I mean, science will show you that. You can see how it's linked to, cortisol and stress.
I was looking at a website the other day. It's called Happify. And what they do is for people who have stress issues or depression issues and just can't think a happy thought every day, they send you one for you. They actually will send you happy thoughts, happy videos, happy information, just to make you laugh, just to make you smile, because it's been scientifically proven that the more you smile, the more you laugh, the more positive thoughts you think, the happier a person you are and the healthier you are.
Yep.
So amazing, such a simple thing. And then they turn it into a web application.
Well, the Bible says a cheerful heart is good medicine. And we know laughing is good endorphins, right? We talk about laughter. And some of the trainings that I've done with cancer, they talk about, laughing and why that's important. And sometimes we don't laugh enough. You don't smile enough. We tend to, I forget what the study was, and I don't want to get it wrong, but there was a crazy amount of negative thoughts that each person had on a daily basis. I mean, it was just, what they studied. It was just ridiculous how much, negative thoughts, driving in these streets, how many negative thoughts we have.
That person's going to cut me off.
Driving here. So, we're just bombarded with that, and not enough of the positive chemical messages being sent to us, through laughter and smiles or hugs, little things like that we can do to, make us feel better and send positive chemicals, through our system.
I'm a big hugger. I like hugging. I think you learn a lot from people when you hug them.
Yeah.
There's the 2-arm hug, the 1-arm hug, the uncomfortable hug, the too close hug.
And the very distant hug.
Hug. You can really find out a lot about them. Personally, I think, everybody here works hard in life. We all work hard to our level of whatever that is. I doubt if you'll run into a person that says, no, I don't work hard and I don't really care about things. And, that's just not who we are, especially in America. When you go to other countries, it's relaxation and you have your siesta during the day. And even in Europe, you take time off. And we don't do that here in America. So we have to come up with a better way of approaching our lifestyle hardships or the stress of our lifestyle. And I think laughter would be a great one. Everybody go out there and tell somebody a joke. Tell somebody, look at something that happened that you would normally be frustrated about and spin it and make it funny, or make it lighthearted. Think about Harry Potter, that ghoul or gremlin thing that comes out of the closet in the Harry Potter show.
Okay.
And it strikes at your biggest fear. And so it turns into whatever you're afraid of.
Okay.
But if you think happy thoughts or funny thoughts, it turns into something comical. Maybe we could do that with ourselves. I also, are you familiar with the Osher Center of Integrative Medicine at the University of California in San Francisco?
No, I'm not.
They're doing all kinds of fun things. They're saying that integrative medicine seeks to incorporate treatment options from the conventional alternative approaches. And it says that they are taking into account not only physical symptoms, but also psychological, social, and spiritual aspects to health and illness. Their big promotion, and they've been doing studies on this along with Duke, is to integrate and to start doing actual case studies on this. And I think from my personal opinion, and that's worth whatever it is, that integrative medicine is not getting the foothold in America that you would think it would have, because there isn't a lot of case studies out there. Am I right on this? Wrong on this?
Well, I mean, I cannot disagree with you on that. Now, the funny thing about it, I mean, if you look at just, I guess, the history of medicine, where, you know, in the early times, you know, they looked at so-called medicine as, you know, witchcraft. And then it's funny how it's changed now, where medication is the norm, and because we call it big pharma, has, you know, billions of dollars that they can invest in so-called studies. It tends to be, I guess, the most popular way because it's more scientifically proven, whereas other modalities may be just effective, if not more so. But if you don't make money doing those things, there's not a whole lot of incentive for people to do studies with it.
When it comes back to insurance companies and it comes back to pharma, I get my knee-jerk reaction is boo, because a lot of the costs people are incurring and a lot of the reasons people do or don't get the care all leads back to those two entities. We have a doctor out here, Dr. Tom Delbanco, and he's a Harvard Medical School professor, and he considers integrative medicine fatty. That's not TTY, that's DDY. He says Americans like fads.
Yeah.
Whatever the latest, greatest, wonderful thing is. He says that the 44% of all MD physicians are resistant to integrative medicine, and the hurdles that most people incorporate, or when they're talking to their MD, is the MD saying, "Oh, integrative medicine isn't what you think it is," or so the first line of defense is the MDs are not buying into
behind it. Yeah,
they're not behind it. And then the second region is because of the budgetary constraints, because most insurance companies don't pay for the services of integrative medicine.
Okay.
They'll pay for a traditional office visit or a consultation, but they're not going to pay for that homeopathic vitamin regimen or IV infusion of therapy and things like that. They don't pay for that. So that's an out-of-pocket expense, which ends up being people that have money get integrative medicine and people who don't. And that seems to be a barrier to healthcare that we shouldn't ignore.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. But, you know, the funny thing about that is, in my experience, I see patients who spent a lot more money utilizing the traditional model than if they had just seen me from the beginning into the end. We hit people because of their co-insurances, their co-pays, some diagnostic tests or medications that the insurance may or may not cover, or very little of it. They're stuck with these thousands and thousands of dollars of bills and still really didn't get any maybe relief or the answers that they were looking for. So I can say it's not always the case, but some people immediately, when they think it's not covered by insurance, okay, well, I can't afford it, etc. But yet they'll go to traditional route, and let's say the neurologist orders a test, and now they're stuck with, I don't know, $500 bill or whatever that's left over.
Very true, yeah.
And we see it all the time. But because they went through the traditional route, you know, these bills incurred, and they didn't think nothing of it. It was just kind of part of the process. You go outside the process and you say, okay, well, this needs to be $200, $250, whatever the case may be. You know, immediately, well, it doesn't take insurance. They don't realize that maybe they may save money doing something outside the current system. So I've seen it both ways.
So we have a person with a $1,000 deductible and a $25 an office visit co-payment and a $275 a month premium. If you look at it that way, that's $300 if they went to their doctor every month, $300 a month times 12, $3,600, plus the $1,000 deductible. So that person's out of pocket is $4,600 before the insurance company would kick in.
Exactly.
And if they go to a DO, their integrated medicine provider, they may spend a fraction of that.
Yes.
Most DOs have that challenge, and they have that insurance barrier. Do you guys offer payment plans? Is this normal? Do you have a setup to where somebody can pay down monthly and receive benefits?
You know, it's funny, you know, every practice is, you know, different. You know, doing integrative or you know, functional, or, you know, something that's outside the norm. A lot of places will have things like care credit. Like a dentist office will have care credit, or plastic surgeons, things where, you know, you apply for a line of credit, right? And then that company will, you know, pay the physician, and then you just pay that company like a credit card, you know, over time, or some other types of payment plan, you know, arrangements. But and I think most people have, you know, something, you know, like that.
Like that. Yeah.
You know, whether it's cash, and there's some that do a hybrid model, So we're trying to get creative because I think everybody who went into medicine or healing went into it because they wanted to help people.
Right.
Obviously, if you're trying to make money with it, then you weren't very wise. You would go into business or some other field where you're going to make more money. You don't make a whole lot, in medicine anymore. And the goal should be to help people to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that doctors do not make what they used to make,
not even
unless
close.
They're like specializing in surgery or something like that, but then understand they have huge insurance costs on their own and lots of time and lots of school expenses. So it's not the end-all be-all job of the future when you think about what other things you could do. I mean, you could make an app and probably make as much as a doctor these days. It's a shame because of all the education and background they have to go through. I listen to you and I think of all these wonderful things that we have available to us naturally that we can do to make ourselves healthier.
Yes.
The blood transfusion, were you ultraviolet?
Ultraviolet blood irradiation, the therapy, yes.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yes, I know. Ultraviolet blood irradiation. UBI. Yeah.
UBI. UBI, tell us what type of people use UBI.
You mean what kind of candidates? So
Candidates, yes.
Yeah, so because people who I would say more in tune with alternative therapies, they research those things and they'll call me and say, okay, yeah, I've heard about ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy. I like to do it. So the people who use that are, people who have chronic infections. Mm-hmm. So they've had studies or reporting that, it helps treating, HIV patients, Lyme disease, different bacterial infections. So anybody has some chronic infections, Epstein-Barr mono, those are candidates for it. People who have maybe chronic fatigue, they need to boost their immune system up. They will be great candidates for it. Someone who has cardiovascular issues, poor circulation, it helps to improve oxygenation, improve circulation. They are candidates for it. Those of us who try to treat cancer patients, in alternative ways to support their immune system, to oxygenate the blood, those patients will use it. So, it has a lot of, uses for it. It's been around for a long time, created in Germany. I think it was from the 1920s or 40s or something like that. And it was used a lot until, of course, drug and medicine kind of took over and then pushed all those other therapies put aside. But we've had a lot of success, using it, and people feel really good. Fibromyalgia patients, they do very well with it. So a lot of people.
You have people actually come in from California and Arizona and
Canada,
and they come to Las Vegas to do this with you.
To do the therapies, because it works. That's why when the people say there's not enough studies, yada, 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 I said, well, for me, I don't have time to do a lot of studies. I see it clinically that it works. Patients feel better with it. I'm satisfied with it.
So, and I'm a huge believer of it because my husband fights a bloodborne disease. Mm-hmm. He did it, and it dropped his T-cell count significantly. He went from 90,000 to 17 after that.
So 90,000 to 17,000.
His oncologist is calling it voodoo. and his endocrinologist is like, keep doing it. It won't hurt.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you.
It's not going to hurt you. But him and I, we're like, rock out. This is the best thing ever. And it was phenomenal to see the difference. And they were shocked. They were really shocked to see that.
So he hadn't done anything differently?
Nope. Nothing.
So that's why he attributed to that because there's nothing else that he'd done differently to see what would have caused those numbers to drop.
Nothing he's done is different. I force him to eat healthy. I force him to do his NutriBullet little veggie shake in the morning. He eats candy and ice cream and does all those other things on the sly. His T-cell count went down that much. I'm hoping that this isn't a fluke and he's just not ricocheting around, but we're going to be watching it closely.
Good.
So I just wanted to let you know that from me as a consumer, I was just floored.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's a good thing, isn't it? Dr. Jeffrey Brown is the medical director for First Person Care Clinic, but his practice is at Sparks Family Medicine.
Yes.
And that's on Twain and Hualafi, Sparks Family Medicine. So if you do want to make an appointment to get in to see Dr. Brown, you can call over there.
702-722-2200.
Say that again?
702-722-2200.
This is Tina Drago with Healthy Las Vegas. You're listening to us on KDAWN, KDWN, 720 AM. Thank you.